Hey everybody, welcome to the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast, the show that is faster than Speedy Gonzalez because we always mess up our time zones, and it means that we have to do things really, really fast. I am Griff from GA. You can tell that I'm not in my usual setup today, but, you know, we're going to make it work. And we got a lot of Dynamite to talk about. Joining me is two returning guests, two of the best, I might say. Sergi and Dan, both from ProWrestlingMusings.com. We got a lot of Dynamite to talk. We are, at the time of recording, about 8 days from Double or Nothing. This is going to be, I think, a tremendous show, and hopefully we'll get into a lot about some of the stories, some of the matches that are being built. But I do want to start today with actually something that has nothing to do with anything that we'll probably see at Double or Nothing. It is, of course, the NWA Women's World Championship match between Serena Deeb and Red Velvet. Everyone was talking about this. It was a lot of people's match of the night. Sergi specifically, this is something that you really, really wanted to talk about. Of course, you do Styles Make Fights. You talked about this match. You said originally that you weren't super excited for it, but when you look at this, how did you enjoy this match? What did you think?
Absolutely. I feel that the match was excellent. It was definitely my favorite match of the night, although it had some good competition from a couple of matches that were also very good. All four of the high-profile matches were quite good. But it also highlighted a lot of Red Velvet's strengths and weaknesses as well, I wouldn't really say as a competitor. Yeah, as a competitor and as a personality, as a character on a television show. The thing is, technically, it was an excellent competition, and the distinction between the two is just really highlighted by everything that went down. We have in Serena Deeb someone who knows exactly who she is. She puts on a certain type of match. She doesn't need to change up how she approaches things because she is a seasoned veteran who knows exactly how to get to the result that she wants. Red Velvet is someone who is able to do any kind of wrestling you ask of her. She will go out there and she can do any kind of move. And the problem I'm seeing with her is that she hasn't really chosen what type of character is she? Who is she, and what does that mean for how she fights? I've been looking at her stats, and I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm favoritism or anything. Every wrestler changes it up a little bit with different types of matches. But generally speaking, when I look at someone and it's like, oh, they used a lot more strikes in this fight, they were trying to be more aggressive. Or, oh, Christian used a lot more grapples against Matt Sydal. That's the first time that he has been up against someone significantly smaller than himself. That makes sense. When I look at Red Velvet, I look at every match, and every match has a different mix of offense with no real rhyme or reason. And that's the big problem that I see with her is that she comes out, she has her gestures, her taunts that she uses, and her catchphrase, and it all seems to be, I have the same name as a cake. And it's like, who are you and why do we care? You know, you're from your mama's kitchen. You are mixing a cake. I see that you are mixing a cake. What does that have to do with anything? And the same thing is with her mix of offense. As if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm sure that Griff will be showing you the stats that I put together of all of her different matches. Now, the one thing, caveat I need to put out there is that Craig, who takes down these, mostly takes down the fights on Dynamite, doesn't get a chance to watch a lot of Dark, and so this may not be as true of her matches against people lower on the totem pole than herself. She may have a more specific style that she uses in those types of fights. But as she has gotten her higher profile matches against established stars, and we have 6 of them we have stats on, every time she tries something different, she has not won yet against any established star. I mean, she has a great winning percentage, but it's mostly against jobbers. Yeah, there's just no rhyme or reason to it. In one match, her first match that we have is against Hikaru Shida, which was just a few seconds long, so we don't even worry about that. And then she's up against Britt Baker. There, she uses a lot of grapple moves and a lot of counter wrestling, and that doesn't go so well for her. She makes an attempt against Nyla Rose, and she focuses on strikes and counters. Then against Ty Conti, again strikes and counters, but with more grapples. And then against Cargill, suddenly she's using a lot of flying moves. I thought that was really neat. It's like that. I completely surprised me because I had no idea that was something that she did. But then that was worked into what she's doing against Serena Deeb as well. But with Serena Deeb, she put in a bunch more counters again. And it's just there's no specific style that really says, okay, this is who I am and this is why I fight the way I fight.
Yeah, it's a really interesting look into the way that Red Velvet kind of has been presented. I think what should be addressed is the fact that Red Velvet a year ago was a jobber. You know, she was a Nightmare Factory trainee. She was, just one of many just trying to kind of stick out. And, she had the name of a cake. So that was kind of that was her defining characteristic. Well, now we're seeing how versatile she can really be, and I think that's a real credit to her. I'm a big baseball guy, and in baseball, you'll get situations like this where you have a pitcher coming out of high school. He's like 18, and he has 4 or 5 different kinds of pitches, throws fastball at 95 miles an hour. But there's questions about, can he be a starter? Does he have the endurance? Do we have to put him in the bullpen? That kind of stuff. And having all of those different tools just helps you adjust to eventually what is going to be the role that you settle into. And that is kind of the feeling that I get from Red Velvet right now, that, she's going to end up settling into a specific role for herself. But what it is going to be right now, that's what we don't actually know for sure. But the fact that she does have all these tools, I think, is what's going to help her do that. I really like this match. I think also Serena Deeb needs to be commended for what she was able to do here. I think she is a phenomenal wrestler. And I think what is so impressive about her performance here is that she changed her character. She's not a heel, but she did kind of play the heel in this match to go along with what Red Velvet was going to bring to the table. That was so impressive to me, that Red Velvet, is limited in terms of her character, in terms of, what she's able to do. And so Serena Deeb kind of worked around her and said, we're going to tell a story in this match that's effective for you, and it's going to work for me because, I'm a veteran, I've been around a long time, so I can play whatever character I need to play. Dan, I know that you were really, really high on this match. So when you look at this, what were your thoughts on this? And for Red Velvet, do you feel like she needs to kind of work on developing her character a little bit more?
Yeah, I completely agree. It was the best match of the night for me as well, in terms of quality, and a lot of that was obviously from Serena Deeb. But I thought Red Velvet more than sort of played her part in that, the quality of that match. Her selling is really good, very impressive, and that is obviously a huge part, particularly when, as Sergi says, her role at the moment is to lose these big matches. So those sort of that selling side of things is absolutely crucial. In terms of her sort of character work, I think she's just a very pure, simple babyface at the moment, and I think there is time to sort of develop that side of things. I mean, you have to remember that she probably wasn't even scheduled to be in this sort of run. I think if Brandy hadn't become pregnant, she wouldn't have even sort of been on this run. She sort of basically sort of stepped into that role in the whole Shaq story and has sort of gone from there. And she's still very sort of new and inexperienced the whole thing. I don't think she's wrestled that many matches at all in her entire time there. So there's definitely more than enough time to do it. In terms of the style in the ring, exactly the same thing. I think that will come. I mean, you could be very generous to the booking and say they're doing that almost on purpose, like that she has all these different styles. She hasn't found her character yet. She hasn't found her in-ring style yet. She's still learning, and that's why she's not winning these matches. And certainly that's something they could lean on. And I think that's probably where they are going with her, is that she is going to keep losing these big matches, but she will ultimately battle through. I saw her compared to Jungle Boy elsewhere and some of his earlier starts where he kept losing those big matches as well. And I can certainly see that sort of trajectory for her. And I think she will be an absolute star from what I've seen so far in AEW. She's just not there yet, and I think understandably so. And just a quick one on Serena Deeb. I personally think she's the best wrestler in that division at the moment. In terms of her character, we obviously don't see her very often. She's been away for a while, but in the ring, she just seems to be able to sort of get good matches out of everybody she's with, and it's really impressive to see.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, actually. I talked a little bit about Serena Deeb, but I think it's worth mentioning even more that Deeb is someone who we've become really accustomed to see on the men's side, where you do have someone that is so good, that is so reliable, that they can just go out and put on a great match, and you can kind of ask them to construct the story that needs to be constructed, and the match becomes about the opponent who is less experienced, or whatever the case may be. There's actually a match on this card that we'll talk about a little bit later on that might involve something like that. So Serena Deeb is such a great pair of hands to have around, and I think AEW does know that. And she was hurt for a little bit. She's back now. She's being featured a lot more. Or at least I expect will be featured a lot more than what we've seen. So credit to her. I think she's done a phenomenal job with this. I want to go back to the topic of Red Velvet because, again, I think she is just one of many young women that are starting to come into their own. And it's not just her. We've seen Jade Cargill, Ty Conti, Layla Hirsch. That's just to name a few that you feel like are starting to feel a little bit more confident and feel like they can start to move up the card a little bit. And the fact that, Britt Baker came in and was very disappointing in her babyface run and then turned herself into this heel and now is becoming a much bigger star. You're seeing women get a lot more chances and start to develop themselves a lot more than what we saw last year or 2 years ago, certainly. So, Sergi, of course, you write Styles Make Fights, so you study all of this stuff very, very closely. So when it comes to Red Velvet, do you feel like she needs to settle in to a particular style? Is this sort of versatility type thing, is this going to work for her long term? Or does she really need to settle down, find herself a character? And if she does, what do you think that style should be going forward?
That's a really excellent question. It's very hard to say because there are so many options. That's the trouble with someone who I think that Gareth quoted the Yakuza looking fellow from NJPW talking about John Moxley. All the things that he can't do, all the things that he can't do are what make him so good. His gaps in what he's able to do are what show what he can focus on. People who can do everything, it's very difficult for them to choose. Like, this is where I'm really going to focus. And there's nothing wrong with having a lot of flexibility. I think that, like, my favorite example for that is Darby Allin. Darby Allin has a very defined character. You know exactly who he is, but he has the ability to bring out a different side to himself if the situation and the opponent call for it. And that, I think, is really what Red Velvet needs. She needs to be someone who, yes, she can do everything, but she's only going to choose to do different things based on who she's fighting and based on why she needs to. And then there needs to be a comfort zone of, and I think it would really help if we got to see some of her wins, the stats from them. If I can convince Craig to watch some Dark, or if they actually give her some matches where she is higher on the pecking order than who she's fighting on Dynamite, and not always just show her losses. She's got to have a comfort zone of, this is what I do when I'm not being pushed to my limit. This is just a standard Red Velvet match. This is what it looks like. And I think that the thing is, she has made it very clear and it's very obvious that she is capable of doing all of the things. she's excellent at them. She has technical ability in all of them, and that's what makes it very difficult for someone like her. Frankie Kazarian's another example. He has all the tools. Who is he? You know, and it's a real similar thing, but very different. Like Dan said, Dan made a really excellent point with Frankie Kazarian. That's he's a veteran, so that's not telling a story of someone who hasn't found himself. For Red Velvet, it fits a story of someone who hasn't put in the reps yet, someone who hasn't found themselves and hasn't really gotten those big wins yet, and we get to see that development. So I'm not saying it's a negative thing. I'm saying this is where she's at right now, and it's going to be fascinating to see where it goes.
I think you're absolutely right. I don't think versatility should be viewed as a negative in any kind of way, because it's definitely not. It's a great problem to have. The fact that, you know, Red Velvet can kind of do what she needs to do. It's just a matter of what is her character going to be, what is going to be most effective for her. I want to talk specifically about Serena Deeb's contributions to this match, because I think that that's being overlooked a little bit. And it's a credit to her. It's being overlooked because she was the safe pair of hands. As I said, she's the one that we knew was going to put on a great match here. Red Velvet was the one that needed to be made coming from all this. But I think we would be remiss as people who, you know, study the statistics of wrestling. We would be remiss to talk about Serena Deeb and her contributions. Again, she kind of played the heel in this match, which is a little bit different than what we've seen from her, but it ended up working really well. Still only 3 fouls, not a whole lot to go on there, but she did control most of the match in terms of match offense percentage, more strikes from her, less powerful strikes. Red Velvet was really the one that was given a lot of had more strike downs. She was given a lot more of that kind of power look. And so Red Velvet, you know, looked like a more dangerous striker. She was diving more. Serena Deeb was just a more balanced wrestler, more volume striker, more grapples. 35 seconds of submission, most of it in that Serenity lock, which ended up winning her the match, which I thought was a great story. Kind of, you know, that the story of that Serenity lock going forward. So, Dan, I want to give you the opportunity to talk about Serena Deeb's contributions to this match and why it worked so well.
Absolutely. I thought she sort of managed the match superbly, again, with someone much more inexperienced than she is. I thought the really interesting thing from Deeb on this one was, as Sergi said, she is a babyface, but there was definitely more of that edge to her on this one, probably out of necessity with the fact that she was against an absolutely pure babyface in Red Velvet. So I think she almost had to sort of play that slight edgier role in this match. But it's great to see that she can do that. It's something I've always loved about, and this is a very high comparison. Tanahashi in New Japan, he is, you know, an absolute babyface, but there are matches when he's up against someone like Ibushi where he'll turn slightly and become that slight heel for that match alone. And it's something that, you know, a great wrestler can do on the sort of the turn of a dime like that, and she seems to have that in her locker, which I hadn't necessarily seen previously. So I certainly hope we see a lot more of her. The only slight disappointment actually is whether this match or whether a match for the NWA title should have been on the Double or Nothing card, and whether there's still time to do that. I don't know. It doesn't look like it, because going back to what we were talking at the start there with the amount of talent in the women's division at the moment, there only being one match on that Double or Nothing card doesn't seem to necessarily match up with that depth of talent. And I think it's very worth saying that there's a third hour coming not for Dynamite but for AEW soon. That's obviously all been announced, and I think the women's division might be the one that really benefits from that, because it sometimes feels like, you know, it's a really hard line to tread.
Yeah, I completely agree that the AEW is in a much better problem to have. They have a much better problem to have in having a great division that people are unhappy that it's not being featured enough, versus having a division that people aren't happy that it's not great. But they do need to feature it more. I completely agree with Dan that having that extra hour for Rampage will help. Obviously, they have the YouTube shows where the women's division is featured very heavily, but those are not watched so much, and it's mostly just jobber matches and not a lot of storylines happening there. So, I mean, it's a matter of choices. They only have so much time. 2 hours isn't a lot, and they've got all these stories they're trying to tell, and they just need to be willing to make the choices of, you know what, you guys are going to have to wait, because one women's match every week is not enough, and it looks like they've, to some extent, made that first step of that we've got 2 women's matches on this last Dynamite, but having only one on the long, what was usually about 3-hour pay-per-view, with all those men featured and only 2 women, it's not as good of a look.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, and I think that transitions perfectly into the next match that I want to talk about, that being Christian Cage against Matt Sydal, because those are 2 guys who, exist also in that same category of all of these wrestlers that people will say, they need a push. We should see them more frequently on TV, whatever. And in the case of Matt Sydal, that definitely is a lot of what people were saying. Sydal comes in and he was a standout pretty much everywhere he's been. And then he comes into AEW and he's just kind of a guy that is there and he can do some cool stuff, but he doesn't really stand out above the rest. But this match in particular, Cage versus Sydal, I thought this was excellent. I thought this was a really interesting look into the way that Matt Sydal can kind of change his game based on the match that he needs to fight. This is a lot different than what we're used to seeing from Sydal, a lot more strikes than we're used to seeing from him. It was a straight 50-50 split when it comes to the match offense percentage, and I thought that reflected really well on Sydal, and it reflected well on Cage, because, Christian's going to be the babyface, at least for now. So, as we've seen in AEW, if you are the babyface, you don't necessarily need to play the role that we're used to seeing them play, meaning that you have less of the match offense. Christian can do either one. I thought Sydal looked great in this match, and this was as entertaining a 9-minute match as you can find. So we'll start with Dan. When you look at Christian versus Sydal, this I think is evidence of how deep AEW's roster is. They can take someone like Matt Sydal, who's not on TV every week, and he can go out there and have a great match with Christian. What did you think about this contest?
I really like this match. I didn't see sort of glowing reviews of it elsewhere after Dynamite, but I thought it was a really good match, actually. It was one of those sort of fairly typical Christian matches in lots of ways, and relatively sort of slow build at the start, but then I thought the sort of the middle section of this match in particular was brilliant, and I actually think that they could probably put on a 15-minute match, which would be superb. But obviously, this wasn't the place for that at all. But I thought it was in sort of stark contrast to some of the opening matches we see on Dynamite, the sort of fireworks factory tag matches we see, and that's often how things sort of blow up at the start. But this was a different type of match. But I thought it was absolutely a brilliant match in itself. I think the issue is perhaps what was it there for? That's I think perhaps the wider question on that one. It seemed to be sort of setting up the casino battle royale. That sort of seemed to be its role, and I do wonder whether we necessarily needed that. But to be honest, you get a good match out of it. I don't think you can really complain too much. I think perhaps that's me being a little bit picky.
Well, again, it goes back to how many stories are being told and how many great wrestlers there are that you can look at a match like this on any show. You'd look at this and say, man, this I love seeing this match on the show. But there is a legitimate question of, exactly what story was this telling? What were we designed to get out of this? I thought it was great. I thought it was a great inclusion. This is the second time in a month now or maybe a little over a month, that Christian has opened Dynamite with a much different style of match than we're used to seeing, especially because the main event was the kind of high-flying, energetic tag match that we're used to seeing in openers, and we'll get to that main event coming up next. Is the next thing I want to discuss. But in terms of this match, I think Christian brings in a much different style than we see from a lot of guys in AEW. He kind of brings in that wily veteran, I don't want to say slower. I would say more deliberate is the better way to put it. A much more deliberate match style which if you do it all the time, it kind of gets monotonous. But if there's one guy who does it, and in Christian's case does it really well, then I think that's great. I love seeing that Christian can put on much different matches than we'd be used to seeing in this spot. And to have him in the Battle Royal, AEW does a phenomenal job with these Battle Royals. I think they are the best company in the world when it comes to booking Battle Royals. So Christian's role here, there's always a surprise waiting for us. So I guess you'd have to say that Christian is probably the favorite, given the fact that he came in and immediately seemed to kind of lock eyes with Kenny Omega. But there could always be a surprise. And honestly, Christian performing like this against Kenny Omega, I would take that match every day of the week and twice on Sunday, to be honest with you. Sergi, what did you think of this match here?
A couple of points. First, I'm going to start with the last thing you said, which was where Christian is going now, next, which is this Battle Royal. Obviously, it is an option for shooting him to the main event that they've been planning him to have from the beginning. But there still remains the Joker. We don't know who one of the entrants is. And it could certainly be someone who is a high-profile new signing that they want to hotshot to a Kenny Omega match immediately, like they did with Brian Cage when they brought him in.
I was just going to bring that up. Thanks for bringing up Brian Cage, because he was in that Joker position. We've seen AEW. The Joker has been maybe like I seem to remember very early on there was a women's battle royal where the Joker, I think, was ODB, maybe? No, it was someone who didn't work for the company. I can't remember exactly who it was, but it was someone who didn't work for the company. Mercedes Martinez, that's who it was.
Oh, right.
And she didn't work for the company, but she came in and it was a big pop to have her. So AEW's done that, but then they've also had the Brian Cage route where they've signed a new guy, they bring him in and immediately put him on top. And in the case of Brian Cage, it certainly worked. So it's a good point.
And the thing is that that's the one time per year that they can bring someone in and immediately put them on top. They couldn't do that with Miro because they have these structures. They're like, we don't hotshot guys unless they win this one match per year. So for Miro, it's like, we need you to spin your wheels for a while, but play with these guys for a while because you need to build up some wins. I mean, they make jokes about it all the time. John Moxley made a joke about TK being a stats guy, and Britt, of course, mocks him for it regularly in her promos. Like, I'm the person. Why do I got to prove it? But like they insist that no, you got to prove it if you want a high profile match, if you want a world championship match, you have to prove that you deserve it. Unlike in other companies that aren't as picky about records. But let's talk about the match itself. This was a really unusual match. You guys pointed out that it was an unusual match for Matt Sydal. He got an opportunity to be more aggressive, use more strikes, and control more of the offense. One thing, though, that he did not change, and that's very consistent with Matt Sydal, and is an example of what I was talking about, of how you can look at a person's types of offense and learn a lot about who they are as a character and what that means for how they fight and how that affects who we're supposed to believe who they are. What didn't change is the man never cheats. And it's unusual because this is not a company that generally relies on never cheating as a sign of who the good guys are. There are a lot of good guys who use fouls lots, including Christian Cage, but especially, of course, John Moxley and of course Darby Allin. We have a lot of people who you would call gritty sorts of baby faces who are like, if the ref's not looking, it don't count. Or if it's something that only if I release it before the count of 5, that is within the rules, right? That's the rules. I got 5. But I think what the most interesting thing about this match is that not only did Matt Sydal have an opportunity to control more of the offense, it was also true of Christian Cage. The big thing I pointed out going into this is that these are both guys who, in all of their matches so far, and there were a lot less data points for Christian Cage, it's early on in his AEW career, but all of their matches so far, each of them has in each match always done a rope-a-dope type of strategy. They have not tried to control most of the offense. I was like, well, who's going to be the guy who gets to keep their usual strategy and who's going to change it up? I assumed it was probably going to be Christian Cage that would change it up and that Matt Sydal would do most of the selling, but I was wrong. It turned out that it was a completely back and forth affair. Christian Cage would dominate briefly. Matt Sydal would dominate briefly. Not enough so if you look at the flow of offense, there's no big back and forth, because in the 3-minute intervals that Craig uses, there was lots of changes. Like if he had it in 30-second intervals, you'd see that back and forth of this is when Christian controlled and this is when Matt Sydal controlled, but it went back and forth too quickly for those 3-minute intervals to even capture it.
That's a really interesting point, because that match graph, I always like looking at it because it's a really good kind of bird's eye view of the way a match has progressed. And very often when you get a babyface versus heel, there is a distinctive flow to it, whether it's the heel dominating the babyface making the comeback, or sometimes, and this happened actually in the Red Velvet Serena Deeb match, where Red Velvet made her comeback halfway through the match. And so you kind of get this spike in the 3 to 6 minute interval, and then Serena Deeb starts to take over again. But in this match, the two basically mirrored each other the entire match. Yep. It was very interesting, I thought, because
it was
that's
more
not
of
something we're
a
used
graph
to seeing.
of the pace of the match than of who was controlling.
Yeah, that's a fantastic way to put it. It absolutely was. So, Dan, I think this is really valuable for AEW to have someone like Christian that is able to wrestle this style and wrestle it really well. I think the story that begins to be told is, Christian, he kind of matches his level to whoever he's facing, not in a sense of playing down to his opponents. We hear that in sports a lot. So he's not doing that, but he faces someone like Sydal who is faster than him, who, tends to go for more flying moves than he does, and he kind of matches that intensity, matches that level. It seems to me like that's the story that's going to be told with Christian going forward, kind of working into the outwork everyone slogan that he came in with. I think that that's an effective way to do it because Christian is an effective wrestler and he is able to do that. Do you think that Christian is going to be able to, change the way he wrestles, given that we just talked about Red Velvet and all of us agreed that eventually Red Velvet's going to have to settle down into one style? Is Christian an exception to that rule?
To a certain extent, yes. You don't sort of think of Christian as being a submission specialist or a high flyer, but his style is actually being able to do everything, as you said. And I think, unlike someone like we were talking about Kaz earlier, whether that perhaps sometimes counts against him as a character, I think it is exactly part of Christian's character that he can do all of these things. And as you said, it means that he matches up very well to everyone. It was something that we saw back in the WWE days when he was and TNA as well, wherever he's been, he does have that ability to wrestle different types of matches against different people. I think there's a slight sort of style to his matches. They do sort of start quite slowly and then build very well. That's obviously the way he likes to build matches. But in terms of the actual style during that period, it's he's certainly able to do more than one thing. And just looking at the stats, I was actually amazed, considering it is only a 9-minute match, the amount of stuff they actually got through. If you look at the, so there's over 30 strikes, 24 reversals. What was it? Loads of the big offense. Still time for a minute and a half of submissions. 11 pin attempts. You think, how did they manage to do that in 9 minutes? It's genuinely quite impressive that they managed to do that. But I suppose that's because, and yet it didn't feel like it was packed full of stuff, so that none of it resonated. And I think that's when you've got two experienced wrestlers like these two. They that's what they're able to deliver.
So, in a manner of speaking, this was actually kind of similar to the kind of match that we've come to expect from an AEW opener. I mean, there was a lot of stuff here, like you said, very, very high intensity, and that's what we've come to expect from AEW openers. Is just generally they tend to do that through spots, and in this one, there weren't any spots. I mean, if you had told me that this was entirely called in the ring except for the finish, I would have believed you, and maybe it was. given the experience of both of these guys. So it's kind of interesting that we're seeing this very, very high-paced match, but the pacing is all done with strikes and grapples and pin attempts and submissions and these kinds of things. No spots really to speak of. And I like that. I like that there's that variety in what we might be seeing to kick off a Dynamite.
Yeah, so it's the thing that Okada built his entire sort of legacy on. I think is that style of pacing the matches brilliantly, and still packing a lot in, but not making it feel like it's full of spots or moments. And I think again, sort of a very high benchmark to put against anyone. But yeah, absolutely, Christian is that style of wrestler, and has been doing it for longer than Okada. So.
I am a big UCLA fan. In fact, I'm wearing a UCLA t-shirt right now, and in the words of the legendary UCLA basketball coach, John Wooden said, "Be quick, don't hurry." That was one of the tenets that he always taught on his pyramid of success, and I think that's a great way to think about these types of veterans. This match in particular, very, very high pace, but none of it felt like they were rushing me through. And I think that's a credit to these guys. Absolutely know what they're doing, and to Okada as well. Because you bringing that up made me think of that, because that's exactly how I would describe Okada.
That's funny. That's in the Army they say slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
Interesting. Okay. All right. I like that too. We'll
concept.
Go with both of those. I think describe exactly. Both of those I think describe what we saw, which again impresses me because it's so different than what we're used to getting from AEW openers. We'll move from the opener to the closer, featuring a team that has opened Dynamite a whole lot. It is the newly heel Young Bucks. They have settled in beautifully to this heel role, and as has been talked about by a lot of different people, this match, this main event, tag team title match, seemed to exist to get over the Varsity Blondes without them winning. I thought it did that. I thought the Varsity Blondes looked fantastic. I've been a fan of theirs from the beginning. I think they really have something. I don't think they're just a high spots team. And there's been comparisons to the Young Bucks among many other teams. I don't think Varsity Blondes are that, and I think this match definitely showed that they have a lot to give. This was the polar opposite of what we saw from Christian and Sydal. This was a purely babyface team in the Blondes versus a purely heel team in the Bucks. And when you look at, I want to start with the graph here. Usually we start with the numbers, but I want to talk about this offensive graph because this was exactly what you'd expect from a match like this. And the Blondes start out hot. The Bucks take over. Blondes make their comeback. The Bucks take over again, and they end the match Bucks on top. I thought this was a great match. I think the Young Bucks are absolutely brilliant. Their heel work to me is just, it's so good. And to me, it feels like the Bucks, their reputation coming in was they're a high spots tag team. They were a junior tag team in New Japan for most of their run. They obviously in TNA were known for doing all these high spots and being kind of dopey and not being able to tell stories. That was the reputation. Not to say that it was accurate, but that was kind of the stereotype attached to these guys. And it feels like the whole time in AEW, they have kind of taken that personally. And they've said, no, we're not just a high spots team. We're not just spot monkeys, as Matt Hardy famously called them. We can tell stories. And this heel run to me is some of the best storytelling that we've seen, because not only are we seeing it in their characters, they're taunting a whole lot, 17 taunts in this match. They're taunting a lot, they're fouling a lot. It's not only that, but their in-ring style itself has changed, and they're wrestling different matches now. I think this is a real credit to them. I think they've done a phenomenal job reinventing themselves as heels, and I couldn't be happier with what we're seeing from them. I cannot wait to see them against Mox and Kingston coming up at Double or Nothing, and against whoever else they might be facing down the line. Sergi, I know that you have been high on the Bucks in the past with this heel run. I don't know your thoughts on the Varsity Blondes, but I have a feeling that you were pretty impressed by them in this match. So looking at this, do you feel like the Blondes came out looking a lot better? I guess came out with more momentum than they did coming in.
Anybody who gets a chance to be in the main event for the first time, that demonstrates a lot of faith that the promotion has in you as someone going forward, as someone that they're going to rely on going forward, someone that they're going to develop going forward. I think that the Blondes are a fantastic generic babyface team, which is just as good and bad as it sounds. It's like on the other hand, I will grant that in response to having his father invoked, the that not Garrison.
Brian Pillman.
Pillman cut a really decent and fiery promo tonight or that night before the match. That was good. But for the most part, they are just super fun but generic baby faces. I feel like all the time when I watch them, it's like it's Pillman, and if he had ever had a tag team with Von Erich. Garrison looks so much like Von Erich. It's crazy. It's like they both look like second generation wrestlers. But and they're good. I don't know if they'll ever be interesting, but they're good, and you need those two.
They're very similar to Red Velvet, actually. I was talking about Red Velvet earlier in terms of that sort of pure baby face without a huge amount else of heft behind them yet. I think they are certainly in that sort of style in their character work at the moment. But yeah, obviously just being highlighted at that level against the Bucks on a headline match in Dynamite, that shows that they are thought of highly, at least.
Well, I think it shows that these two guys, I think they've been working really hard. That's kind of the impression that I'm getting from people around AEW that have talked about it, and there definitely seemed to be this sense of, these guys have earned their way into this match, because again, we've talked about this with the women's and the men's singles. In the tag division, AEW has this as well. There's so many teams that you could put into a match like this, where the whole idea is the Bucks are going to go over here. They just want to have a fun match to pop the crowd at the end of the show who the Bucks are as characters ahead of Mox and Kingston, and of course having the post-match angle where Kingston steals their shoes and all this kind of stuff, which I thought was really funny. But so they could have chosen anyone, but they did choose the Varsity Blondes, and I think that shows the Blondes earned their way into this. I think the inclusion of Julia Hart really helps. She has something for me that's different than just generic babyface tag team number 5, and I think it was when she caught Matt Jackson using the cold spray, and she pointed it out to the ref, and so the ref chastises him for it and all that. I thought that exchange was really great, and so she catches him, and then the ref reprimands him, and Julia Hart's celebrating because this is the first time that anyone's caught the Bucks cheating, so she's celebrating, and then she turns around, and then Matt blasts her in the face with a second bottle. That one I thought was great. I think the Varsity Blondes, there is a ceiling on them if they stay this kind of babyface. I think in today's wrestling, the generic, because I do think they are generic. I said that they're not just a high spots team. In terms of their match style, they are a lot different, but in terms of their characters, they are pretty generic. I think there's a ceiling on that these days for tag teams, but if they develop their characters a little bit, or if they turn heel at some point, they could be the exact same characters, but if they're heel and they're kind of that, like, what comes to mind is they did this in WWE with what was it, the Varsity Squad, the Cheer Squad, whatever it was called.
Spirit Squad.
Spirit Squad, that's right. So they did that. Buff Bagwell did this really well, where he did all this babyface stuff, but he was a heel, so it just got really annoying. Like, he'd have all this flashy pyro and stuff for his entrance, and he was a heel. If they did that, I think that would work as well, because Julia Hart could do the exact same thing, but she's like harassing babyfaces. So if they wanted to do that at some point, I think that would work really well, which I think would contrast really well with another young, sort of generic babyface, high-flying tag team in Top Flight, who I'm really high on. A lot of people were high on them. I think one of them is hurt, so they're not getting a lot of reps as a team right now. But if you want to set up in the future, Top Flight are the baby faces versus Varsity Blondes, who are the heels, I would be down for that. And then obviously the physical comparisons between Griff Garrison and Jungle Boy if you wanted to have Jurassic Express get back into the mix and feud with Varsity Blondes. I'm totally fantasy booking out now. The point is, I think the Varsity Blondes are very similar to, as Dan said, to Red Velvet, in that there's a lot of places they could go with this, but there's a lot of trust certainly put in them against the Young Bucks here, and the Bucks just made them look like $1 million. No pun intended.
The other match I'd like
no
to
pun
see.
intended.
The other one I'd like to see.
I'm ashamed of myself.
The other contest I'd like to see the Varsity Blondes in is potentially again against the Revival, FTR. Sorry, not the Revival.
Yeah.
Because you've got two sort
I
of
would love to see that.
two old school teams in that sense, but different types of old school. And I
Old
think you
school
could
baby faces versus old
exactly.
school heels.
Really match that one up. It would be like, it would be. I think that one would work really well. But yeah, completely agree with you, Griff. There's so many places they can go with them, and even if they're not the finished article yet, I much prefer seeing teams like that being given that opportunity on Dynamite to headline Dynamite. But let's see them develop through being on the show rather than having, Randy Orton versus Drew McIntyre match 84 of the year, because they're so worried about putting any of the inexperienced people towards the top of the card. I think it's you've got to be careful how often you do it, but I think it's good that they do every now and again, and that's why you get people like Darby Allin coming through so quickly.
For sure.
This is kind of, it represented kind of a sink or swim moment in a way. I mean, I think AEW is very confident that the Blondes would be able to handle themselves in this kind of situation, and putting them in there with the Young Bucks, who are one of the best teams of this generation, I would think. There's not a ton of risk, but there is a little bit of risk if you put in a new team that is not very experienced doing TV matches to this level of audience. To have them go out there and perform the way they did, I think is a credit to AEW. This is a team that formed in AEW, and they come in and now they've main evented Dynamite. So this is not the only team or wrestler that has kind of been homegrown in AEW and now has had a lot of success. I mean, Darby Allin was a TNT champion for months, and he's a homegrown AEW guy. He was a star. He became a star in AEW, so that's just one example. I want to include in this conversation the Bucks' opponent at Double or Nothing, of course, Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston. They also had a match against another young tag team that has been getting more and more, I'm going to do this to you again, I'm sorry. They've been getting more and more acclaim as they've gone on. That, of course, being the acclaimed Max Caster and Anthony Bowens. I love this team. We talked last week on the podcast about the mixtape that they dropped. I think it's excellent. I've been listening to it all week. Max Caster, I thought his rap was fantastic, as it always is. Moxley coming in and knocking out Anthony Bowens as he's doing the AEW thing, which I thought was just a great little touch, because you'd think that Moxley would kick their ass during the rap, but he doesn't. He lets him finish. And then once he's finished, you as a fan are thinking, well, Anthony Bowens is going to do his, AEW, we are the acclaimed kind of thing, or the acclaimed have arrived, and Mox doesn't let him do it, and he just hits him. I thought that was great.
It's one of my favorite moments.
This match,
one of my favorite moments of AEW this year, I think, when Mox hit that punch. It was just spectacular. It was everything that I love about Moxley, just delivered on someone who absolutely deserved it at that point. It was absolutely.
Yeah, it was perfect. I think that what made it really perfect is that they planned that out just really well. That Max Caster always has his insulting raps, and I was leading into it, I was questioning, like, okay, does it really fit Eddie Kingston's character to stand there and listen while Max Caster talks trash? It does not. But this time, most of the things that he said were the sort of things that would make somebody like Eddie Kingston and somebody like Jon Moxley shrug and go, yeah, I guess that's fair. Like Eddie Kingston, you look like a pack of menthols. It's like that's rude, but true. You know,
Yeah,
it wasn't until the
it kind
end
of feels
that
like
he goes, you know, I think that I need some oral sessions, and it's just like, wait, no, now you crossed the line. Just at the right moment that he was able to finish his rap, and then it's like, yep, nope, that's the one that crossed the line, and now you're gonna get some revenge.
Well, it does really fit the character, because Mox and Kingston, we've been kind of seeing that there's just these two buddies. You know, we all have these friends, you know, where you just, like, you sit around and you drink beer or whatever, and you're sitting around a barbecue and you're just, you know, busting each other's chops and whatever. And so, yeah, if someone lands a great insult, then your friends will start laughing, you know.
Exactly.
But they're not, but there are lines that you don't cross. And so, talking about a man's wife, that's one of the lines that you don't cross. And so they didn't let him cross that. What I thought was great was Anthony Bowens. The reason why Bowens was the one who got attacked and not Caster was because Caster said what he said, but then Bowens tried to justify it. He gets on the mic and he says, "She wants us on the podcast." I'm like, everyone knows what you meant. But that's why Bowens was the one who got punched and not Caster. I thought that was a great sequence.
I love how
this match.
Sorry, I love how
No, go ahead.
that in the very early goings of the match, then Eddie Kingston is beating up on, I believe, Caster, and is if you hear him through the mics, he's totally saying, "You want to talk about Renee, huh?"
Which does, again, it really fits the story of these characters that they're trying to tell. As far as the match does go, I thought this was a really good showing for Mox and Kingston, two guys who, you know, they're great characters and they work well in terms of the way their characters mesh. The question was, how good are they going to look in the ring? If you haven't really watched Dark or Elevation, then you haven't seen a whole lot of them. Actually, you haven't seen any of them as a real tag team in a kind of more competitive tag match like this. I thought this match was a really, really good reflection on these two guys. Lots of strikes thrown, 58 strikes for them in just 10 minutes. 13 strike downs, so they hit hard. We know that they hit hard. Not a whole lot of flashiness from them. No dives. To your point from earlier, Sergi, 8 fouls from them. They had more fouls than the heels, and they're the baby faces. But again, this is Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston. Kingston was a heel a couple months ago. Moxley's always been this way. But these two guys, I just, you know, what more can you say? These two guys work as a team. They just mesh so well, and it's such a good contrast to the Young Bucks, who also mesh really well, but in a completely different way. And so now you get these two badass baby faces going up against the absolute most chicken shit of heels in the Young Bucks. And I mean, who doesn't want this match at this point? You know, I mean, Dan, did this match make you excited for Mox and King versus Young Bucks at Double or Nothing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the match I'm looking forward to most on that pay-per-view. I think, as you said, you've got two perfectly natural teams in their own ways. They're not having to. Doesn't feel like they're trying to build up this hatred on this. It's happening, and yeah, the styles are so different. There's so much history behind it already. I think, yeah, it's going to be an absolutely superb match. Do some quick shout out to Mox and Kingston in that promo at the start of the show as well. They were talking about not understanding what a kick party was, and whether they. Yeah,
I did like that where Kingston said, "Do you have to throw super kicks to be invited to the party?"
Yeah,
he's a rapper and a rapper's friend.
A rapper's friend, yeah. But yeah, I mean, this match really sort of established that, because we haven't seen a lot of them as a tag team in the ring, so that this match did very well in delivering that sort of missing piece, because that's the one thing we haven't really seen yet. And again, we said this right at the start of the show. You know, that felt like a go home show for Double or Nothing, and this is one of the things they just had to do, and they delivered it absolutely brilliantly. And I thought the Acclaimed, played their role superbly in this as well, in just taking an absolute beating at the start, and then and I really like their finish as well, that double team paradigm shift. I think that looks good, and we will see that in the match. Whether it'll be to win the match or not, I don't know, but it will. It gives them a finisher, which I think is a really important thing for a big match like this.
Well, what's interesting about it is that isn't like when they hit that seemed to me to be more of like I guess you would say a move in the moment, because originally they do actually have a finisher. They have the
half.
half and half suplex lariat combination, which actually has a name. It's King's Crown or something like that. It actually does have a name, and Excalibur said the name when they went for it earlier in the match. So you're seeing a team that they were not a team like 2-3 months ago that now actually have 2 tag team finishers. Because they used that half and half lariat combination to get a win just recently. This Monday's Elevation that I was watching, they used that move to get a win, and now we've seen the double team paradigm shift. So they have 2 finishers now that they could conceivably use. The paradigm shift's going to be more dangerous because that is Moxley's finisher, and I think, has it been kicked out of an AEW? I don't think so.
No, I don't think it has. No. But it'll work as well.
I think the
Bucks have got about
the closest
different finishers, haven't they? So you've suddenly got
That's true.
So you could have a real sort of WWE finisher fest towards the end if you wanted to. But
you could, but it would really work if they did that, because at the end of the day, there is Mox's paradigm shift, and the Bucks. I guess it would be the Meltzer driver for the Bucks. I don't think anyone's kicked out of that in AEW. But they all, the Bucks especially have, like you said, just a billion different moves that they use. So this is, I think, Dan, you're absolutely right, a situation where Mox and King work so well as characters put together. I want to see more of them. I want to see them on their own show, really. I was kind of hoping that this announcement of Rampage was just Mox and Kingston for an hour sitting around a campfire. I think we're not going to get that. I'm a little disappointed, but they work so well as characters. The question is, as a team, do they mesh well in the ring? I think this match says definitively yes, they do. And, for whatever issues they might have in terms of tag team wrestling, just getting the flow of the match and whatever, the Bucks are going to help them get through that. As we just saw, the Bucks took a much, much less experienced pair of wrestlers and, gave them a really great match in the main event that we were just talking about. Sergi, I will give you the last word on this whole tag team situation. Dan says the Bucks versus Mox and Kingston is his most anticipated match of Double or Nothing. How excited are you to see this match go down?
It sounds like an absolutely fantastic match. I really love the pairing of Moxley and Kingston for all the reasons you said. When they're together, they feel like poker night. They feel like barbecue and beer. And that's their appeal. Like, we're just regular guys who happen to be really good at fighting, but we're just regular guys, and we hang out and we drink a beer and we enjoy each other's company. Whereas the Bucks are just absolutely fantastic as just hateable and intentionally. They aren't. There's lots of people whose wrestling character is someone who isn't trying to be hated. Well, there's just something about them that rubs you the wrong way. But you could tell that within the story, and like in real life, yes, it's intentional. But within the story, they're not trying to. The characters, I don't mean the actual people. Of course, the actual people want to be hated. They're the heel. But the characters are trying to be hated. They're doing it on purpose because screw all you. You never gave us any credit anyway, so to hell with y'all, all the fans. People will ask, what's the point of even doing the fake tag behind the referee's back? What advantage does it give them? It's like, it's just to piss you off. It did. That's it. That's all.
Exactly.
It took time for them to do it. Time that they could have spent doing something else, but they knew it would piss you off watching it, and that's plenty enough reason for them to take some time to arrange that little nonsense and everything, especially the older brother, Matt. Right?
Matt.
Yes, especially Matt. Matt is intentionally incredibly despicable. Every facial expression is just like, how can I be as annoying as any human being could possibly be?
Exactly. Well, he did the whole Shawn Michaels Ric Flair thing when they were fighting SCU. There was, what I love about this is, and it was so great. And what I love about it, and something that I want to talk about in a second concerning another character that I'm sure you've all been waiting for me to bring up, there's a new way of working fans these days. So it used to be you would work someone by making them think that something is real, right? And that's the general definition of working a fan. Well, these days everyone and their mother knows that wrestling is fake. So you don't work someone anymore by convincing them that you actually punch someone in the mouth, you know. I guess in the case of when Mike Tyson did it a few weeks ago, that did work some people, because people did really think that he punched Cash in the mouth. But in the conventional sense of working someone, that doesn't really exist anymore. In the sense of working the fans online because they think that they're smarter than the wrestlers, that's the new sense of working someone, and the Bucks do that. So in you brought up the perfect point. The idea that, you know, the Bucks do the fake tag thing, and these days all the fans that play armchair quarterback say, well, why do you do that? There's no point in doing that. The point is so that you will talk about it. That is being worked now. That is the new sense of being worked. I think that the Bucks are doing all this stuff that in kayfabe is kind of dubious, but the whole point is to work all of us into saying, well, that doesn't make any sense in the context of a wrestling match. Yeah, that's the point. That's exactly what they want you to think. And I think the Bucks just settle in so well. When they were baby faces, the criticism that was levied against them a lot was they tried too hard. They're trying so hard to make people like them by doing all these high spots and all this kind of over-the-top acting and all this stuff. Well, now all of that same stuff, fewer high spots, more over-the-top acting, it just makes them hated heels, and it's like they're not even trying. I mean, they just walk out there and they have that air about them, which really goes for the entire elite. I mean, they just walk out there, and this attitude that they have, which they've cultivated over years and years, this would not work if the Bucks and Kenny and the Good Brothers hadn't spent so many years having as much success as they have. This character would not work, but they have, so this character really does work. The character, the wrestler in AEW that is working people more than anyone else is, of course, my favorite, Anthony Ogogo of the Factory. He is working every single person online, and I love it. I love what he's doing. I love this story. We had a long conversation last week on the podcast about Cody Rhodes' promo and about how this story, you know, maybe doesn't work for some people because of, you know, the fact that it's different than what we saw coming in. I think all of that, it's gone. We're a week past that. What we have now is Anthony Ogogo, who I think is a brilliant heel. I think everything he does, like he carries himself like a star, but he knows he's a star, and there's something about that annoys you. It's one of the things that is just has always been the case in humanity, that if someone is better at everything than everyone, better at something than everyone else, you want that person to remain humble. You don't want them to remind you that they're better than you at all of these other things. That's just been the case forever. Well, the easiest way to get heat is to actually be better than people at something and let them know about it. That's exactly what Anthony Ogogo does. So he gets so much heat. This match against Austin Gunn, I thought, was kind of a redo of his first match that he had a few weeks ago, where people were saying the ref stoppage happened too quick, it wasn't realistic, you know, all of these kind of criticisms that were levied against it. They were minor at the end of the day, but they were there. This match was kind of a make good. Hits him twice, starts bleeding from the mouth. The referee wants him to stop the fight, and Austin Gunn tells him no, and then Ogogo just knocks him out, which may have happened for real. Talk about working people. I mean, that was so convincing, the fact that he just unleashed that right. It's no secret. I love Ogogo. I love what he's doing. I love this story. I can't wait to see him go against Cody. I think Cody is a perfect opponent because Cody is so good. He's such a good wrestler that he will be able to guide Anthony Ogogo to a great match. And honestly, if Ogogo is even just decent in the ring, if he's just average, I think he'll be a star for a long time. So I will hand it off now to Dan first to talk about. You don't have to talk about this, but talk about whatever you want.
No, I'll talk
before I go on too long.
Talk about the great British hero that is Anthony Ogogo. I think you're wrong.
Exactly.
No, I thought it was superb. This match,
And for the LGBT community.
and indeed, yes. But no, I think he was super. I mean, he literally punched Austin Gunn's insides into smithereens. Like, seems to be. I hope he's okay, because like I thought the commentary on this was superb, because they were sort of like, is Ogogo bleeding? Is he bleeding? And then like, no, the blood is coming from inside.
You realize it's coming out of his mouth.
Yeah, it's like, it was superb, and as you said, it delivers any criticism that people might have of that style of his, which is, that punch is basically going to end a match, I don't really see how that can be still levels as a criticism anymore. It looks so devastating that it's believable. And I'm going into this match against Cody. I think that if he hits Cody in the stomach, that's it. That's the match over. And that it'll be really interesting to see what they do with that match. I think because we still don't really know what Ogogo can do in the ring. We saw him sell a little bit in this match, but only very little before he just punched him basically. And then so it's going to be really, really interesting to see what they do, because you feel like it can't go more than sort of 5 minutes, but then Cody matches don't tend to go that short generally. It'll be except for one indeed. And you do wonder if that Brody Lee match will be a bit of a template for this, or it's probably actually the hardest match to call on the card, I would say, in terms of which way they're going to go.
I totally agree.
And I think that's a credit to them, because they've got one of their most popular babyfaces, one of the most experienced wrestlers, against a guy who's been in the ring for combined about 3 minutes, delivered 4 moves, and exactly. It still feels like it's more than an even matchup.
I think
on the topic of his. Oh, go ahead, sir.
I was going to say that I think that Anthony Ogogo is a perfect example of what we've been talking about, that AEW doesn't rely on cheating as their guide to who is a fan favorite and who is a villain. Anthony Ogogo is very good at what he does. Anthony Ogogo doesn't cheat, doesn't need to cheat. That doesn't make him anyone that you're going to root for. Fans are going to hate him, despite the fact that he seems like a very good person as well. In terms of, he officiated his sister's gay wedding. He says all kinds of good things, but at the same time, he also seems genuinely sadistic about what he does in the ring. It's not that he's cheating; it's just that he's just brutal and sadistic about it. And don't get me wrong, there are wrestlers who can come off as a little bit sadistic in what they do, and still get people to love them for it, like a Jon Moxley or a Penta. But something about the way he carries himself tells you this is someone who he's just a monster and terrifying and brutal and sadistic, and we are going to boo him, and I think he's very good at that.
What I love about it is he's sadistic in a very believable manner. So you do get these people, and we're seeing it more and more now that we're seeing more indie wrestlers come into prominence in places like AEW, where they're sadistic, but they're like cartoonishly sadistic. Like they have a bloodlust kind of thing, which doesn't, like, no one knows anyone like that. At least I hope you don't. Someone who just, loves like making people bleed and stuff like that. So we do get that, which is realistic because we've all seen movies or read books or whatever where there are characters like that. But Anthony Ogogo is realistically sadistic. And what I mean by that is, if anyone knows anyone who's trained in boxing or mixed martial arts, there are those people that just love it. They love hitting people. You know what I mean? And it just, or in football that exists as well, where you just love hitting people. And Ogogo is very believable that he does this.
Yeah.
Exactly. But he's so believable. I don't know if either of you guys saw his what's the name of the show? Is it behind the mat? So whatever show that he was on recently, which was kind of like a half shoot, half work kind of thing. But one of the questions that was asked to him was, "What is your favorite sound?" And he says, "When you break someone's nose." That kind of, and like, it's so believable because I totally believe that he just loves to break people's bones and listen to the sound that makes. He's such a believable, and it's there. The one topic that I want to talk about is something that you brought up, Sergi, and Dan, calling him the British hero and all this stuff, and me, who has been so high on him from the beginning. Here's the thing. It's so hard to be heel these days because the number and size of the internet wrestling community and all of us smarks, all of us total nerds, if you are a heel that works, we like it because we appreciate the work that you're doing. So you're a babyface to us. If you're a heel that doesn't work, then we hate you, but it's go away heat. It's not real heat. It's go away heat. So someone like Baron Corbin is a perfect example. Go away heat. And Anthony Ogogo is someone who is obviously a heel. He's treated like a heel. But you have all these people that are saying, oh, I love Ogogo. He should be the babyface here. And I agree. He will make a great babyface one day.
Yep.
He has a great story. You could easily do this kind of British hero thing and turn that into a babyface thing, even in America. Because if you just don't put down the United States, if he's just a British hero because he's an Olympic medalist and all this stuff, and he doesn't put down the United States, you got a babyface. And all of these things that he does in his personal life, all of this, he, by all accounts, is a good person. So he will be a great babyface someday. But for right now, this guy is a phenomenal heel. He just gets how to have heat, and it's so rare these days that people can generate, really, really good heat, and that they know how to do it. MJF comes to mind as someone who is young but gets it, knows how to have heat. Anthony Ogogo is the same thing. He's less experienced than MJF, even though he's older, but he's far less experienced in wrestling, and he, to me, just gets it. And I love that about him. So this match at Double or Nothing, I don't know what's going to happen, but it maybe is my most anticipated match on the card because I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I know, right?
But here's the thing that just occurred to me when you were describing how what a great babyface he'd be in the future. It just occurred to me that if you replace boxing with stretching, he's the exact same character as William Regal. William Regal is basically incredibly sadistic, loves to inflict pain, and can be a hated villain or just a respected veteran. And he could have the exact same story of just being the hated, nasty villain, or turn on a dime and be the guy who you respect for being tough and the tough but fair kind of fellow that loves Britain and is very British, but isn't putting down anybody else because of it.
Yeah, I think there's an appreciation of British culture in the U.S. Maybe it's just me because I love soccer, so I watch soccer all the time. So it might be me with a little bias, but I think there is an appreciation of British culture in the U.S. And so if he just didn't put down the United States and he was just a proud patriot, but was a good person, I absolutely agree with you. That's a babyface. So there's nothing wrong with being a British patriot. So I'm fine if that's the character that they're gonna sell me in 2 years, 3 years, whatever the case may be. Give me that. That's totally fine with me.
And he's got a great story as well because he's got the had to retire from boxing because of the eye injury. You can lean on that as a babyface perfectly. But I think you're right though. I joke about and have been on Twitter about Anthony Ogogo being the babyface in this, etc., etc. But I actually think they're treading the line quite well of having. They will have seen all of that feedback, but they haven't, panicked and gone, "Oh my goodness, we best make him the babyface or something stupid like that." He is still being the heel on screen, and and I think a match like that is a brilliant way of doing it because it backs up what he's been saying on Twitter and in the interviews. Just punching someone in the gut and that's it, and walking away smiling. That's pure heel stuff. And they're treading that line between a popular heel very well at the moment.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree. We are about out of time, but there's one thing that I want to talk about because you talk about having natural heel heat, so I would be remiss if we didn't very, very quickly touch on the Inner Circle Pinnacle stuff. They're coming up on Stadium Stampede. So, Dan, I'll give you the first word here. Did the promos that we saw on this show make you any more excited to see Stadium Stampede at Double or Nothing?
It was definitely better than last week. That's I think last week was a bit of a disaster on that front, for my personal taste anyway. I didn't think it worked very well. So I'm still not quite sure how they're going to do Stadium Stampede at the moment, with a crowd around, sort of there at the time, not obviously in the stadium, but what's going to happen? Are they going to be watching the screen? How are they going to follow all the different people? The different types of people in this match. So I think there's a lot of questions about how that match will work. But in terms of sort of the character work this week, building that up, I think it was much better. I particularly enjoyed the Pinnacle lunch or whatever it was, dinner thing with Wardlow drinking out of a bottle of red wine. I thought that was superb, and Sean Spears just being like insane. I quite like this.
I loved Sean Spears in that segment.
Yeah, I think that this sort of slightly unhinged Sean Spears character is actually really good, and is sort of feeding off the fact that people didn't think he was going to be much when he came across, and I think that's sort of what they're feeding into, and I thought he was and Tully just throwing the money at the waiter and saying, "Oh, that was superb."
You have been inconvenienced.
Exactly. Yes.
Exactly. Here's this wad of cash for Sean Spears almost breaking your skull on the table.
And I thought the Inner Circle response was pretty good as well. Them immediately coming
Chris
back
Jericho.
with Jericho there last week, but Jericho is when Jericho gets it right, he gets it right, and particularly at the end of that we're going to piss on your graves. It's a great line. It makes you want to watch the match, and I'm certainly more up for it than I was at the end of last week.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Sergi, you any more excited to see this match at Double or Nothing?
Yeah, I everything that they've been doing as far as making this a loser must disband match, well, or at least if the
Inner Circle loses, then they have to disband. Which
it's not
is
both ways. But
that's very important.
About
I think
it's all been going in the direction that I've been expecting from the beginning, is that this is all about, we need to get these people out of our rear view window so that we can focus on our real goals. And I love that. I love everything that Dan pointed out about the great character building they did in that pre-tape of the dinner. But I also especially loved that MJF came right out and said what I have been saying as ought to be his goals from the beginning. We are all about taking all the championships. We're focused on you, and you're in our way because you're a distraction. That's why we want. That's why we
Dax said that
wanted this match to begin with. Is because we don't need another match with you. We've already beaten you. The only reason we want this match is to beat you finally, and be done with you. And here's the big question: is that really what they're going to do? It would be an incredible statement to have them win twice in a row and take the Inner Circle out. On the other hand, if the Inner Circle survives this, it's a great feel-good moment. The Inner Circle wins their signature match again, but then where does that feud go? Yeah, I'm definitely very, very invested in this match. It's funny, the one match that we haven't talked about is the main event.
Yes.
That's true. Well, because there wasn't a lot to that this time. I thought the segment with Orange Cassidy was really good. Kenny Omega, Don Callis, they're absolute pricks. I mean, they're just the worst people in a good way. And so, they come in to Cassidy, and they knew he was going to tear up the contract, so they had another one in the folder, and and the fact, like, there's just the little comments they were making, and Chris Statlander, the little thing that I liked was Statlander squaring up to Omega, and Omega, like, kind of backing away a little bit, just being like, I don't want the issue. I thought that was cool, because Omega, he right now, by all accounts, is the baddest man on the planet, right? He has all of these championships. He's a heavyweight champion in these different promotions and all this stuff. I mean, no one should touch him, but he's afraid of Chris Statlander in a little bit. So I think, nothing wrong with that. Pac, great promo, always great promo from Pac. So I think the main event situation just kind of stayed pretty steady here. It's going to be a great match. We all know it's going to be a great match. But in terms of the story that is being told, there are other stories on this show that I'm more looking forward to seeing be completed. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
sure.
I think there's a bit more work to do with that one. I think it would be good to see them focus on that story a lot on the Friday actual go-home show. I think that's the match that needs the build now.
Sure.
And they have got that Dynamite left to do it. But I agree with Sergio. There's a reason we haven't spoken about it, and I think it's because it hasn't felt like it's at the top of the card in the way it's been built so far. Partly by by accident, because obviously they had the problem with the match in the first place and everything that happened. So I think next week is a good time for them to sort of really build that up, send everyone into that final Dynamite, knowing that is going to be a big match.
Absolutely. We know AEW does a good go home.
Exactly.
And I think that for me, this is another example of AEW being willing to take someone who is homegrown, who is newer to the audience, and putting them in a really high-profile position. And that's so great to see, just because I'm just such a huge fan of Orange Cassidy and everything that he does.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And look, Pac, I mean, this guy's, to me, top 5 wrestler in the world, just in terms of his in-ring ability. So you have Orange Cassidy in there, and the fact that Orange Cassidy is going to be the weakest worker in that match by a large margin, and he is a tremendous worker himself, that says a lot about the match that we're going to get. So I almost feel like that's AEW's strategy here. They're saying, look, in a way, this build has kind of been cursed because we had that injury, that freak injury that happened in the number 1 contenders match. We didn't get the finish we wanted. So the story that we're going to tell basically is buy this pay-per-view for everything else. And by the way, in the main event, you're going to get this incredible match between 3 tremendous workers. They're going to put on a 38-star classic or whatever, because it's just what they're going to do. There's no question that this match is going to be tremendous. So AEW is basically saying, buy the show for all the rest of the stuff that you're going to see. And as a bonus, you're going to get this great match in the end, which is fine with me.
Absolutely. I think that it definitely, though, again, puts them in the position of the people who have criticized them for their handling of the women's division are going to say, wasn't this the moment to give Britt Baker the main event? And they may have a point. Yep. And honestly, if it happens, I would be happy with that. But I think that we shouldn't get our hopes up too high, because that would be kind of a huge jump to place that in the main event. And there's several other matches that still have the possibility of jumping over the triple threat to go to the main event. The Stadium Stampede could be a main event. The tag title match could be a main event. Because they've all got really high profile people in them.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Embarrassment of riches for AEW. That's kind of the theme of today's show. And with that, we are out of time on the Pro Wrestling Musings podcast, so you know the deal. We'll start with Dan. Dan, please tell the people where they can find you.
They can find me at Wrestling Rhymes, and the reason I'm sort of rushing everyone along now is we're obviously off to a big Anthony Ogogo fan party here in Britain now. So I'll let you know how that goes.
I assume they have those every day there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's England, naturally. He's a national hero.
Sergi of Styles Make Fights fame, please tell the people where they can find you.
Well, I certainly always watch out for my Twitter. My nickname there is Styles Makes Fights, but the handle is actually at Sergi Alderman. And approximately weekly, I put out the Styles Makes Fights column at the ProWrestlingMusings.com website.
Well, worth your time to go check that out. I have been Griff from GA. You can go check me out on my YouTube channel over at General Admission Wrestling. And while you're there, if you're not already on YouTube, check out the Pro Wrestling Musings YouTube page. We got lots of cool stuff. We just released our first AEW Power Rankings. And spoiler alert, pretty much everyone we talked about today is on those rankings in some form or fashion. So go check that out, including Anthony Ogogo. Yes, I did rank him in the top 10. So if you want to know more about why I did that, it's not just because I'm a fanboy. Go watch those rankings. You can find out. Once again, thank you for joining us here. We got a crazy week coming up. Next week, we will have a Dynamite review, a Double or Nothing preview. We'll obviously have then our Double or Nothing review after that pay-per-view. So there's a ton going on next week. So make sure to keep it locked. Pro Wrestling Musings on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course over on the website, ProWrestlingMusings.com. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us.